Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Duzi. I'm an SDR here at Cecure Intelligence Limited, and I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our webinar today, which is titled AWS Cost Management for Managers. All right, so before we get into today's webinar, there are a few keynotes we would like to inform you guys about. So firstly, we'd like to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. Yeah, so at the end of the webinar, a link to our YouTube channel will be sent to you, so you can always go to our social media channel or our YouTube page to rewatch this webinar. All right, so during the process of the presentation as well, attendees can react or raise their hands during the presentation. So you can always raise your hands or react during the presentation if you have questions or comments that you would like the host to address. You can also drop your questions or your comments in the Q&A section of this webinar, and the host will address your questions or comments during or after the presentation. And if you still have further questions, a link to book a consultation with our team will be sent on the Q&A section, so you can always book a consultation for if you have further questions or you need further assistance with your AWS account. Our team is dedicated and will be available to help you resolve those issues today. All right, so moving on. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are Cecure Intelligence Limited. All right, so here at CIL, we focus on, please let's move on to the next slide. All right, so here at CIL, we are team solution builders. All right, we apply technology to drive effectiveness, agility, and growth for businesses. We're also positioned to help enterprises scale globally. So we have four major pillars that we work with. The first is global mindset. The second is multi-cloud competence, agility, and growth. All right, so before we head into the agenda for today's webinar, I would like to introduce John Toriola. He's a cloud engineer here at CIL, one of our leading engineers. So I'd like to welcome him as he'll be hosting us on today's webinar topic. So John.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is John Toriola, and I'll be taking the webinar for today. Sorry, please. I think my network is okay. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. Sorry, please. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? I'd like to be sure before proceeding.
Yes, John, we can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much, Doze. So my name is John Toriola, and I'm the lead cloud engineer here at Cecure Intelligence. And today we'll be discussing on the topic cloud cost management on AWS for managers. Now, this topic is as important as the money, like the level you will place the webinar for today is on the same level you will place how much you want to spend on your AWS account. You get, if you want to have little spendings on AWS or on your AWS account, you want to pay very good attention to the webinar of today, because in this webinar, one of our agenda will be to understand why you need to manage costs on AWS. Now, the topic today will go in depth into cost management, but we will also do a little bit of introduction into cost optimization. Then in subsequent webinars, we'll go in depth into cost optimizations. But for today's webinar, we'll do cost management and a little bit of introduction to cost optimization. Okay, so now we want to know what does it mean to manage your cost on AWS. Now, if you've played a lot, probably in your organization has played a lot on AWS. There is no way, except if your organization has been doing things the right way, there's no way you will not have complaints about cost on AWS. Now, because that is one of the complaints I've had a lot about. Now, I've been in a position to take some enterprise organizations in Nigeria. I mean, banks, big organizations in Nigeria. Yeah, I've had to teach them one or two on AWS, and one of their core questions has always been, okay, what about cost? Like when I mean enterprise organizations, I mean probably the CEO of some of these organizations, because I've had to sit with them to, okay, what's happening? How do you want to scale? What do you do about scaling? Now, when you talk about other things on AWS to these people that call shots in this organization, that call the shots in the organizations, what they want to know is, what is the cost? How much am I going to be spending? They kind of understand every other advantages of going to the cloud, but their issue is always with the cost, because they feel it's always expensive. And I've always had to explain to them that the truth is, if you are coming from on-prem into the cloud and you want to do the things you are doing on on-prem, you want to do the things you do on on-prem the same way you do them on on-prem on the cloud. If you want to do them the same way on the cloud, you will be spending a lot. You will be spending on that's the truth. But if you do it the right way, the way that's why you need a cloud engineer, probably somebody versed with the particular provider you are trying to work with. In this instance, AWS. You need an organization or an AWS partner like us, because we have enough understanding of AWS. You need to partner with us or other partners, AWS partners, to help you build what you want to be. Yeah, we can work together, but the knowledge we will transfer to your team will be enough for you to get the best cost savings on AWS. So it is very, very important to do things the right way when you are moving to the cloud. If not, you will complain. Now, before I proceed, let me quickly say this. Now, here at CIL, yeah, my colleague earlier introduced you to what we do here in CIL. We do more than AWS related stuff. Anything related to tech, we can actually use AWS to solve your issue. If your issue can be solved with AWS resources, we can use other cloud providers also to solve your issues if they can be solved with other cloud. But we do more than just provisioning resources. We are into data engineering, cloud engineering, machine learning engineering. We work on workload migrations to any cloud of your choice. Those are the things we do, and several more. Probably you're having an expensive cost at the moment and you want to scale down. You want to scale up at the same time managing your costs. Okay, we can help you with that. Those are some of the things we do. That's just a preamble. Like, we do a lot of things. So you can, if you want to reach out to us, you can drop a message in the in-call message, and we'll attend to that in the chat. Okay, so another thing we'll look at is how do I manage cost on AWS? Are there things I need to do? Are there things I need to know to get the best cost savings? Now, we will deal with that in this webinar today. Now, and lastly, we'll do a demo of our Cost Explorer. So you have an idea. Cost Explorer talks about visibility. We'll talk about that in this webinar. You have an idea of how much you are spending on which or what resource. We might also go forward, and if we have enough time, we can do a short demo on budgets. So, but you get to understand most of these terms I'm trained about in a few minutes. So, and lastly, we'll have a session where we'll take questions, and I give answers to your questions, and some of my other colleagues on the call also can answer your questions. So let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so it's expected that by the end of this webinar, you will not only have not only know about AWS cost management, you will also understand how to manage your costs, because that is the aim of this webinar. Knowing the terminologies, knowing the ways of doing things, and not actually doing those things is actually like a negative in my book. Okay, if you know how to do something, you want to do it. So how do you go about managing your cost on AWS? What do you need to do? Which resources do you need to have in-depth understanding of so you can manage your cost properly? That's another thing we'll be discussing in the webinar. And lastly, we also want you to have like a general understanding, majorly now of AWS as it relates to cost optimization. So that will just be like an addendum to this webinar. Subsequent webinars will go in depth on cost optimization. So If I can get the next slide, please. So the first question, why do I need to manage cost on AWS? Why? I'm sure you know the answer to that question. Because if you don't manage costs, probably you are the cloud engineer on the project, and the project is amassing a lot of money, then you will be queried. So what is happening? When we wanted to move, probably you can have a discussion in this line with your boss. Okay, John, when we wanted to move to AWS, you told us we will get things cheaper. But in the last 2-3 months, the expenses has actually been much. What is happening? This is not what you promised us. How do we get to a stable pricing and a good pricing that will benefit the organization? You will get that from time to time if most especially you are the one handling the cloud engineering part of your organization. You are the one that is interfacing with the AWS console or AWS probably the cloud, the shell, and you are the middleman between the organization and AWS. You will be asked a lot of questions in line of, okay, what is happening? You told us we will be spending $200, but at the moment you are spending $300. Okay, let me give you a scenario. I was actually in on a call with several CTOs of big organizations here in Nigeria. We were actually teaching them on 1 or 2 things to do to manage their costs also. And I got a question because I was stressing the fact that if you do things right on AWS, not the regular way you've always done things, you will be getting a lot of cost savings. And they were like we are interested. We want to know how to do things right. And I gave them an example. It's a very simple example that I'll be sharing with everyone on this call today. If your organization has been hosting your resources, your servers, your networking on on-prem, like you do everything on-prem, probably a data center that your organization owns. That's where you manage all your resources. And you are trying to move to the cloud. Now, there is because most of the time, some of these organizations, they don't want to get an engineer that has played with AWS. Let's say you are moving to AWS. They just want to do things the way they've been doing it. So what most organizations do most times is, okay, we have an instance on-prem that has let's say 8 gig RAM and probably the storage of about 30 gigabyte storage. So this is what we have on-prem. Let us mimic the same server on the cloud. Good, you can do that. But the truth is, the one you have on-prem, have you maximized the resource, that resource on-prem? If you haven't, and you are trying to move to that's when you start having issues. Now, most times, another thing I told the particular manager I was discussing with was, okay, if all you are hosting with that server is a web application, probably a simple web application, that's what you are hosting with that server. So why not rethink the process? Instead of hosting it when you want to move to the cloud, instead of hosting it in an EC2 instance, why not go with something like an S3 bucket? Now, S3 bucket is very cheap. You can just host your web server in the bucket, and you will get a lot of cost savings, a whole lot. That alone, if you think about this whole thing in that direction, okay, your goal is to do the things you are doing on-prem, on the cloud, but you want to do it the right way. You want to do it in a way that you will get the best cost savings. That's how you think. Okay, instead of using a server, a very expensive server, to host my web application, why not host in something like an S3 bucket? Now, S3 bucket will give you all the benefits the server will give you at a very cheap price. So there's a thinking that you have to think in this direction if you are moving to the cloud. You don't just want to move everything the same way you're doing it on-prem to the cloud. You can do that. And I bet you that's where people start complain about lot of cost and the likes. because you want to do an 100% replication. There are some resources, obviously, that you replicate as they are. But a lot of resources you can get some AWS services that will work better for that resource than something you provision on-prem. So that's the idea. If there's one or two things you need to know, which we will go depth on some of them in this particular webinar to discuss with you, that will really help you with a lot of cost savings. But that's the reason. Why do I want to manage? Because the cost can actually accumulate very fast if you are not doing things the right way. Okay, let's quickly move to the next slide. Okay, so let's go in depth a little bit. Managing cost on AWS. How do I do it? What do I need to know so I can manage my cost properly? Actually, the first two slides, understanding AWS pricing models and monitoring and visibility, I will want to go in depth into those two. So we'll take those two first. Then I will now come back to right sizing instances, storage optimization, spot instances. I'll give you examples of where you can get benefit from all these ones, from all these services, instead of doing it the regular way. So let's quickly take understanding AWS pricing models. Let's get to the next slide, please. Now, these are services that helps you get very solid cost savings on AWS. But we'll touch on this, like this, an overview of most of the services I'll be talking about today. So we'll get back to this. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next. So next slide, please. Okay, AWS pricing models. Now, this is one of the, I said we'll talk about cost optimization. This is actually one of the ways to optimize your price. Understanding things like this, it goes a long way in you managing your cost on AWS. Now, the first major thing I have there is on-demand instances. What are on-demand instances? Now, whenever most organizations are moving to the cloud like that, without doing a proper like they didn't go through the proper avenue, what they do is, we are using 8 gig RAM on-prem with something like a 30 gigabyte storage. Let's look for an instance on AWS that will give us the same compute and the same storage. Then they come into AWS, go into EC2, do the same thing, and they say they are on AWS. Yeah, they are on AWS, but the price will surprise them. Because if it's a long-term project, so a project that you expect to last for about 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, there are better ways of doing things. Because that thing you did of going into EC2 and provisioning an EC2 a server, that's actually on-demand instance. An on-demand instance is actually expensive. You don't want to go that route if it's a long-term project. Now, there's an instance called reserved instances. Now, reserved instances gives you about, sorry, please. Okay, it gives you about 70% savings, within the range of 60 to 70% savings over on-demand instances. Now, imagine an instance, probably at the end of the month, you're supposed to pay $100, and now you are paying $40. Can you imagine what type of cost saving that is? But if you don't know about the pricing models on AWS, you won't be able to figure that out. So this is where the beauty of cost management, like if you understand these things, you're going to get good cost savings. Another thing there is savings plan. It's almost like reserved instances, but savings plan can actually come in different package. You can have a complete saving plan. Now, complete savings plan will help all resources that has to do with probably an EC2 instance, a Lambda function. In resources like that, you can have a compute savings plan. The same as reserved instance, you can get about 70%, almost in some cases even more than 70% cost savings if you are going with savings plan. Now, both reserved instances and savings plans, you can book for probably 1 year upfront reserve plan, and about 3 years upfront, 1 year or 3 years. The instances are supposed to be paying $100 for if you are going with on demand, which is the method you actually went if you just go ahead to provision Sorry, please. The instances directly, you are going on demand. That is very, very expensive. Unlike going the route of savings plan or reserved instances, which is like about, as I said earlier, almost 60 to 70% cheap. Now, you can't beat that pricing. You can't. If you provision an on-demand instance of $100 and you probably put it in several availability zones, let's say 3 different availability zones, and each of them is $100. Now, $100 in 3 different availability zones with $300 monthly on the instance alone, if you are going on demand. Now, when you go with either the reserved instance or savings plan, you will be getting, instead of paying $300 monthly, you'll be paying as little as probably a little bit over $100, about probably $150 to $120. That is a lot of savings. And that is just one of the ways you can optimize your cost on AWS. Now, let's talk about spot instances. What is spot instance? Now, a spot instance is an instance that you can provision, you can actually get from AWS that it's not, okay, let me just say it's not permanent in a way. AWS can request for the instance back at any time. So what usually, how spot instance comes about is probably, okay, AWS has a lot of servers. Now, there are some servers that are actually not being used at the moment. Then instead of those servers sitting idly in the data center of AWS, they want to give it out at a very cheap price. Now, you as an organization, the organization wants a very cheap instance. What you want to do on that instance is something that won't take too long. Something very short, like it's just a very simple. Okay, you want to do something that probably won't last for a very long time. It's not a long-term project. Sorry, please. It's not a long-term project. It's something for a short term. What do you do? So please, I can't see the slides again. Can you help me with the slides? How does spot instance now help? Now, spot instance has about 90% cost savings. That means an instance that if you had provisioned it with probably the on-demand, an on-demand instance, and you go with spot instances, you'll be paying 90% cheap. It will be 90% cheap. That instead of paying $100, you'll be paying $10 for an on-demand pricing of $100. So please, I need to check what happened with the slides. Okay. Okay, sorry. Can everyone else see the slides? I can see it from my end here. Hopefully, please just drop a message in the income message if you can see the slides. Oh, I can't see it here. That's okay. So that is that. Okay, let me just proceed. Okay, let me open it up here from my end, so we don't. Sorry, just give me a sec. I'll quickly do that. Okay, this looks good. Okay, I'm coming. I'm not able to see the slides. That's why I need to go this route. I need to open it up on my end. Okay, so as I was saying, let's just proceed. Okay, I can see it now. That's okay. That's cool. Okay, so I was discussing spot instances. Spot instances are extremely cheap, 90% cost savings. If you are paying $100 on an on-demand instance, now you'll be paying $10. That's a lot of cost savings. Now, we can actually go, probably when we are having our cost optimization sessions, we'll go in depth on most of these things, like the spot instance and how it works. Another thing is also the spot fleet. Now, the spot fleet takes in, it brings in both words, both the on-demand word, the on-demand instance, and the spot instance. So you can, when you are provisioning a spot fleet, you can say something like, okay, you want the lowest price of you can use to run your workload. both from on-demand instances and spot instances, and you will be getting a lot of cost savings on that, because the spot fleet will not only provision on-demand instances, it will also provision spot instances. Now, there are other details regarding these instances, spot instances, reserved instances, that we can go in depth on today. In subsequent webinars, when we talk about, we will take them as a topic on their own, then we'll go into details. But these are different avenues where you can get a lot of cost savings. So now let's just go to the next slide now, and let's talk about monitoring and visibility, which is very, very important for cost management. So how do you monitor your costs? This is actually one of the important, like, you need to understand this, because when you don't understand this, that's when you start spending more than you should on AWS. What's AWS Cost Explorer? Now, we'll do a little bit of demo of this. Now, Cost Explorer gives you like a graphical representation of all the resources that you have on your AWS account. You can see, you will know how much each of the resource is actually, how much you are spending on each of the resources. That's what Cost Explorer does. You have like a few, okay, I have about 10 EC2 instances in this account, and each of them is costing me $20 per month. Is there anything I can do to reduce the cost on this instance? Now, if you don't know how to use the Cost Explorer, you won't be able to understand these things about your workload on the AWS page. That's why Cost Explorer is very, very important. You can even download the data, so you can review it probably with the management team and the likes, because that's what Cost Explorer offers you. And we'll do a short demo on that before we leave this call. Now, the other thing there is AWS budget. The name implies you want a budget. You want to set a budget of, okay, in the next, for this month, I don't want to spend more than $200 on all my resources. If I'm spending close to that amount, give me an alarm or send me probably a mail. Let me see that, okay, I'm getting close to my estimated budget of $200. That alone is a lot. It will help you a lot, because with AWS budget, you'll be able to figure, okay, I think I'm getting close to my set threshold. Now, if the threshold is $200 and you're already at $180, there's a way you can set the alarm and on the budget to notify you in your email. And okay, at this moment, your budget is $200, and you've already consumed over 80% of your budget. You can get such mail. And when you have that type of information, then you will know, okay, now what I provisioned probably from estimations, you've estimated that what you provision should not cost more than $200 in a month, and you are already getting close to $200 at the middle of the month. That means something is wrong somewhere. Then you want to revisit, you want to review your architecture to see, okay, where you can make cost savings on, where you can optimize your cost on different part of your resource, where you can do cost optimization. That's what AWS budget gives you. It gives you regular, it depends on how you want to set the alarms on the budget. Okay, give me, when I'm 60% or 50% close to my estimated budget, give me an alarm or send me a mail. You can get that with AWS budget. Now, the other thing here is pricing calculator. Now, pricing calculator is actually, that's one of the, it's a very good resource that you can use in relation to AWS budget. Now, what does pricing calculator mean? Price calculator is how you set out, okay, like have an idea or a pricing overview of how much you are going to spend on AWS when you move to AWS. For instance, if you have a simple web application on-prem and you want to move to AWS, you can go to pricing calculator, input the values of probably the storage of your on-prem data, the storage. You can also input the value of the RAM of your on-prem data, of your on-prem server. And on AWS pricing calculator, you can input the same value there, and pricing calculator will give you a range of the instance and the cost of that instance that can also do the same thing that your on-prem data server is doing. So you get an idea, okay, That means if I'm moving to AWS with this data I'm getting from AWS pricing calculator, I should not spend more than $500 or $1,000 in a month. Now, if pricing calculator gives you that estimate, you should know that your spending should be in the range of that amount that pricing calculator has provided you. Probably say pricing calculator did the calculation of $1,000. So you should know that you shouldn't be spending, if you actually spend time and you imputed your values very well on price calculator, you should have a good range. Okay, I shouldn't be spending more than, on average, should be $1,000. Probably $1,100 or $1,200 or $900 within that range on average. Now, if you did that and you did everything correctly, now on moving to the cloud, you now notice that you are spending $2,000. Now, that's where AWS budget comes in. You can now put your AWS budget on that average price that you've estimated for. You've estimated for about $1,000. Then you can put your budget on, okay, notify me if I'm spending close to $900. Notify me if I'm spending close to $1,100. That's where the budget comes in. But AWS pricing calculator would have given you a range that you can work with. Now, another very good service on AWS that you can use that will help you to know, okay, what is really happening in my AWS account is the AWS service called Trusted Advisor. Okay, now you've deployed your resources. Your workload is running fine on AWS. Everything looks good. But you're having issues with the cost. What do you want to do? Open up the Trusted Advisor. The Trusted Advisor has different pillars that it gives you advices on, as the name implies. It gives you advices on different pillars, advices on security, advices on costs, advices on networking. Okay, now let's stick with cost. What advice will you be expecting from Trusted Advisor as regards to cost? Now, AWS Trusted Advisor will tell you something like, okay, in the last 3 months, you provisioned a server that is costing you $50, and you've not used up to the capacity of that server. Like you've been using, let's say, 40% of the capacity of that server. That means you want to scale down because the server is costing you a lot. The Trusted Advisor will give you an idea of that server that will be fine for that workload. So instead of using a server that will cost you ×2 of what you need, Trusted Advisor will give you an advice on, okay, scale down. Instead of using a server of $200 that will cost you $200 per month, you can actually use something that will cost you $80 per month. That is Trusted Advisor. That's one of AWS cost management tools that you have to be familiar. You have to familiarize yourself with if you want to get the best cost savings on AWS. And lastly, on monitoring and visibility, I will just talk about a WAF. Now, I actually use it actually stands for Well Architected Review. Well Architected Review Framework. But what does a Well Architected Review do? Now, it's very close to what a Trusted Advisor does, but for Well Architected Review, it's more like a question and answer. Okay, if you are the one that deployed the whole workload, you want to get an idea of what you are doing right or wrong. Now, before I proceed, let me quickly say this. I said earlier that you might have other things you want to do on AWS. Here at CIL, we do more than cost. We do more than helping you to manage your costs. We can actually help you provision a workload on AWS, on any other cloud provider. That's what we do. Anything related to tech. I told you earlier that we go as far as machine learning related subjects. We can help you set up your machine learning resources. We can help you set up your front-end application, your web server, everything. That's anything related to tech. You can bring it to our doorstep and we'll attend to it. So let me quickly finish up on monitoring and visibility. So if you have any question regarding other things we do, you'll be getting information on that. You can reach out to us probably in our mail, but we'll be dropping a link in the chat box where you can follow to get more information on the things we do. Well Architected Framework, it's a question and answer review. Okay, this instance you provisioned, what is the instance used for? The instance is just a web server, a very simple web server. Then in your well-architected review, you will get like a percentage of things you are doing right and things you are doing wrong, things you need to correct in the account. So that's what a well-architected review does. Now, the review spans about 6 pillars. Goes from security, cost management, performance, and the likes. There are about 6 of them. But cost management is one of the major pillars, because AWS does not want you to spend a lot of dollars on something you can actually get very cheaply. Now, if we can, I think, okay, we'll do a demo on Cost Explorer and AWS budgets, a very simple demo, just to give you an idea of how you visualize these things. So let's just move back on the slides a little bit. I think to the slide where, and I'll just spend, no, yes, no, next one, next slide. No, the previous one. No, not the demo. Like, just go back a bit. I'll let you know when you're done. When you can stay. I want to touch on 1 or 2 things there. Back one more time. Okay, good. Okay. Now, right, let me just quickly touch on right-sizing instances. What does it mean to right-size? I explained this. This is one of the things trusted advisor will help you with. It will tell you, okay, this particular instance you are using it's not the best for this application. Why not scale down? That's right sizing. And you can also use another AWS resource called AWS Compute Optimizer. So there are several resources. Now, this is just an overview of how you do these things. But if you want to go in depth, probably you want to get these things done in your organization, you can reach out to us. We will look into your workload together. We'll give you the best advices you can get for each of the applications, each of the workloads you have running. Now, another thing we want to quickly talk on is storage optimization. What does it mean to optimize your storage? Now, let's say you are doing something heavy on an S3 bucket, but most of the data you are using, you are putting into your S3 bucket is actually data you will use for, like, you need those data max 1 month. Like, you need them in prod for just 1 month. Now, after 1 month, you might not get to that data again, probably in about 6-7 months. You might not require that data again for another 6 months. How can you do an optimization on storage? This also we will go into a deep dive in one of our subsequent webinars. But to just give you an overview, you want to do something like, you want to put a life cycle on the object in the S3 bucket. Now, if the object in the S3 bucket is on, like, the on-demand storage, like the storage that, okay, you are not using any lifecycle method on the storage, then you'll be spending a lot on that particular object. It might cost you a lot when you span it out over a month or sometimes a year. You want to put a life cycle on that S3 bucket. Okay, for the first month, because the object, it will be in production, you need to reach out to it for the first month almost of always. So you want to, okay, after the first month of usage, move this object to a different storage model. Okay, you can move it from something like an S3 standard to a Glacier storage. Now, Glacier storage is extremely cheap, cheaper than the standard S3 storage. So you want to think about things like that when you are moving to AWS. Even if you are on AWS at the moment, those are some of the things you want to have at the back of your mind. What are the different AWS storage layers you can have? You can have your S3 standard. You can have S3 Glacier. You can, that's, I think the previous name was S3 Vault, but it's now Glacier. There are several storage mechanisms like that. Okay, this particular data, is it better in an S3 bucket or in an EBS volume? You want to consider things like that when you are moving or when you are running your resources on the cloud. Now, I discussed spot instances and spot fleet already. Now, let's quickly talk about serverless architecture. Where does serverless architecture come in? How does it help you with your cost management in total? As I said earlier, there are some resources that you are putting in a server. Let's say an EC2 instance. There are some workloads that are running in an EC2 instance that, yes, they will run well on the EC2 instance, but they are better optimized on something like a Lambda function. Now, a Lambda function is a serverless resource on AWS, which costs a lot less than your regular EC2 instance, because it is pay as you go. Only when the Lambda function is running, that's when there's a cost allocated to it. But your EC2 instance, on the other time, 24 hours of the day, as long as the instance is up, it will be costing you a lot of money, even if you are not using that instance at that moment. If you have a workload that can fit in perfectly into a Lambda function, why not move it to a Lambda function instead of using the EC2 instance? These are the different things you want to consider when you are moving to the cloud. And lastly, data transfer costs. There's very important things you need to know about data transfer when you are bringing your workload to the cloud. Now, AWS, let's say something like a VPC endpoint. If you are moving things to an S3 bucket, you can use a VPC endpoint from probably your EC2 instance to an S3 bucket, which if you use an endpoint, it means everything is in AWS. You are not going through the internet, and that is free. So instead of moving let's say your instance and your S3 bucket needs to share an object or a data, if you use VPC endpoint for that movement, you'll be spending $0 on that particular usage. But if you are using your regular internet, the EC2 instance is connecting to the storage using the internet, then you'll be spending a lot more compared to having it free. So these are the different considerations. We're going to, as I said earlier, subsequent webinars will go in depth into most of these resources that I just brushed through. But because of time, it's just an overview. But join us in subsequent webinars and we'll go much more in depth. Okay, now we can take the demo. Can we quickly move to the demo session? Okay, so what do you want to demo? I just want to show you what a Cost Explorer, the cloud visualization you will get with Cost Explorer, and how that visualization will benefit you a lot. Okay, I'll share my screen now. And please, if you can see my screen, just let me know. If you can see my screen, you can just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So can you see my screen? Just a thumbs up would do. Okay, good. Thank you. So this is one of our accounts here at Secure Intelligence, and it's our sandbox account. We just give you an overview of Cost Explorer in this account. So on the console, I will search for Cost Explorer. Now, if you have questions or you want to ask us any other thing about AWS, about GCP, about anything related to tech, you can reach out to my colleagues in the in-call message or in the chat box, and you can talk to them, or you get our contacts and reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to. Okay. More than happy to attend to you. So let's quickly have just a few of what the Cost Explorer is. Now I'll quickly touch on AWS budgets too. But everything you want to know about your cost is in this particular it's on AWS, on this console. So my network is a little bit. So let me just wait a bit for Cost Explorer to display. Okay, so this is the billing console. So on the left hand side, I'll just locate Cost Explorer. Okay. And I'll show you around. Now, I believe you've learned a lot of things. The truth is, doing things right on AWS is a lot of cost savings, a whole lot, compared to doing it on-prem. But if you don't do things right, then you will spend more. So you want to interface with people that have done a lot of things, probably getting a cloud engineer. You talk to an AWS partner as regards moving and getting a good pricing on your AWS resources. Those are the type of information you need. Or you can actually go ahead and let things on your own too. But so this is what Cost Explorer. You can see the data here. Now look at the data I'm showing you. See, it's giving me. Okay, let me just scroll down. Gives you a breakdown of how much you've been spending on the cloud. This our pricing here for September. Look at that. This July of last year, August of last year. Let's see new informations. Okay, I think I should have up to December. Sorry. Okay, this is October. This is November. Can you see a detailed pricing for each of the services? Now, for the month of November, the EC2 instance cost us about $0. Yeah, for the month of November, a whole lot less. But for the month of December, how much is the cost for EC2 instances? About $113. So you have a good feel of, okay, this now there's a way I can filter out other resources so I can get a good overview of a single resource. And you can also download the data as a CSV, so you can get a good, okay, probably you're someone that wants to, you want to check it at a different time, you want to check the CSV, you can do that. This is the beauty of Cost Explorer. You can go in depth. You can, okay, instead of doing it monthly, you can go daily, you can go hourly. It depends on you. But Cost Explorer is the service you want to use to figure out, okay, how do I to get an overview of how much you're spending on every resource on AWS. And lastly, before we go to the question and answer session, let me just give you an idea of what AWS budget looks like. So this is budget and planning. So I'll just click on this. So you will see, okay, how can you set up a budget? I'll show you now very quickly. So there's a lot you can do on AWS. A lot, actually, a lot. Okay, the billing console is coming up now. The budget console. I will just quickly set up a budget. I think my network is lagging. So I can create a budget. So let's just quickly run through creating a budget. I will customize. I'm not using a template they've provisioned. Okay, let's say it's a cost budget. It will give you a cost a budget on cost. So we can quickly do this. So let me quickly input the name of my budget. John test budget. Period. It's monthly. Monthly is good. Let's make it a recurring budget. Every month, it's if you set the budget for $80 now, when a new month starts, it goes back to zero and start reading again. So you can make it a recurring budget. For which month? Okay, we can leave it for this month. Okay, budgeting method, it can either be fixed or planned, but let's go for fixed. Enter your budget amount. How much are you willing to, okay, as a threshold for the alarm or the budget to give you probably an alarm? Let me go with $800. So you can filter down to a single resource. Let's say for an EC2 instance, if I'm spending up to $200 on an EC2 instance in this account, then I want you to flag me. But let's go with all AWS resources, so we can get a good feel of what AWS budget gives you. All resources, $800. That looks cool. So you can put an alert threshold. Alert me if I'm 80% close to my budget, something like that. So you can have about 70%. Okay. So you can go with 70%. If I'm about 70% close to my budget, is it the actual cost or the forecasted cost? Actual cost is good. So we can go with this. So notification preference, if you want to get an email, a message in your mail, so you can just put your mail here. Okay. I want you to send me a mail if I'm about 70% close to $800 that I set as my budget. So you click on next. Think we are on the last. Okay, good. So I can just click on next again. So this is an overview of a review of all the things I set for my budget. Then I can create budget. I think my budget is created. Good. So you see that I've already exceeded the amount $800 for this month. So I'm already being flagged. I'll get a mail immediately. It's that simple. Setting up budget is that simple. So with this and Cost Explorer and other things I've explained, you can imagine how cool it will be if you understand these things and you're able to manage your AWS spendings with it. Now, having visibility of your spending, what it helps you with is it now helps you to be able to do what is called cost optimization. But the first step is getting the visibility, knowing how much each resource is costing you. Then from there, you can now go to figure out, okay, how can I reduce my costs? Now I'm spending $800 on, that's all for the demo. You figure out, okay, I'm spending $800 on EC2 instances. Can I reduce this? You can actually spend far more than that. But okay, now are there other measures I can put in place to reduce this cost on EC2 instances? But you first need to get the visibility of your resources. So AWS cost management, it's a twin product. It's a twin. It incorporates both the management of the cost and the improvement of the cost. You want to be able to reduce the cost. That's the reason why you are getting the visibility of the cost. So that's basically what we want you to learn today. Now, I've gone through a lot of things. I spoke about sports instances, sport fleets, how each of these. The truth is, on most of these things, I didn't go in depth because this is just to explain visibility and monitoring, cost management, how you see the things you're doing. But other things you need to do to reduce costs. In subsequent webinars, you will be getting to learn about those things. But for today, we'll just stay with like an overview of cost management. But subsequent webinars will go in depth. Now that will be basically the end of the webinar for today. Now, if you have any question that probably, okay, I said something and you didn't quite understand what I meant, you can ask the question now. Or probably your organization has gone a particular route and you guys are experiencing a lot of cost increments that you didn't plan for. You can ask the question. I'll pass over the mic to my colleague, Dozie. Thank you. Dozie, are you on call? Okay, I think he's having some network glitch. But if you have any question, you can go ahead and ask now, so I can attend to your questions while we wait for Dozie. You can drop your question in the chat box. So you can drop your questions there, and we'll also attend to it. Okay, if Dozie is not on the call, I believe you should be able to get someone else to. But you can ask your questions now.
Okay.
If you have
John, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I think Dozie is having a little challenge with his network. Okay, so why that is on, there are questions that I would want to read out, that I can see from here. First off, somebody saying that you should explain more details on WAF. So if you can take that part.
Okay, so basically, it's basically a review. It's like, okay, I'm the cloud engineer and you are the owner of the AWS account. You got some engineers to deploy, or probably organization has deployed everything you need. Then as an engineer, that I will get into the WAF review with you. Then there are a list of questions prepared by AWS that I will ask you. Okay, how are you doing? What's like, okay, how much are you spending on cost in the account at the moment? So you give me answers to several questions that AWS has already pre-documented. Then when you give me those answers, based on the answers you are giving, I'll be able to figure out, okay, how much cost optimization you have, if you are doing fine, or if there are several other places you can optimize your cost. Now, it's not the well-attended review is not limited to cost management alone. It goes as far as security, performance efficiency, and the likes. There are about 6 pillars that the review puts into consideration, but cost management is one of those things. So it's if you realize that, okay, your score on cost optimization is very low, then you want to figure out, okay, how can I optimize cost more so I can get a better ratings on cost optimization? So it's more like a question and answer session. The answer will be based on the resources in the account. Then AWS will be able to figure out, okay, based on this answer you've given, we think your cost optimization percentage is low or it's very high. So that's like an overview of well-attended review framework. Sorry, Mika, any other question?
Yeah, none for now. Okay. I hope, Jordan, I hope you understand what WAF is about now. Okay, so someone is asking that if I book one-on-one consultation, what are the benefits for me? Okay, what are the benefits of booking one-on-one consultation? What happens if I book one-on-one consultation?
Okay, if I may quickly answer that. Now, you will get to interact with the team. Okay, probably you might have probably a workload somewhere, either on AWS, Azure, any other cloud provider, or probably your workload is still even on-prem and you want to move it over to AWS. You discuss this with us, then we'll give you an idea of how to go about certain things the right way. Understand? And if you want to employ our expertise on the project, we will come in and we'll help you get everything done in a very short time, giving you the best and the optimal results on literally all your well-attended reviews. You'll be able to, everything we'll be doing will be to a perfect AWS standard, basically, if we are the ones handling. And if you want us, we can also give you advices on what you need to do. So if you book the consultation, we'll have a discussion on what you want us to help you with. And as I said earlier, we handle a lot of things here at CIL. It's beyond. The reason why we know a lot about cost management is because we've actually done a lot with AWS, with Azure, with GCP, and the likes. So we can figure out answers for you. So that's one of the reasons why booking a session with us will really go a long way to help your organization. So
thank you so much.
Okay.
No other question. Thank you so much, John. Right. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I think Doze is back now, so Doze, you can continue.
All right, thank you very much, Emeka, for filling in for me. I really had a little issue with my network. John, thank you very much for this insightful webinar. So I would like to reiterate again, please, if you have questions, you can still drop your questions. If you have questions, you can drop. If you are unable to drop your questions here, like I mentioned earlier, there's a link in the Q&A section where you can book a consultation with our team. We can answer all your questions and also walk you through the process of migrating to the AWS, process of doing your well-architected framework review, because I know someone asked that question. And we can also help manage your AWS accounts with our cloud platform operations. So do well to click on the link and book a consultation with our team. All right, so like we mentioned at the start of this webinar, this session is being recorded, and if you missed any part of this webinar, you can always find the video on our YouTube channel. But not to worry, a link will be sent to you. A link to the replay of this webinar will be sent to you at the end of this webinar, so you can always go back and re-watch this session. So you can reach out to us on our social media handles. We have Instagram, CIL_teams. LinkedIn, we have Secure Intelligence. For Twitter, is CIL_teams. For Facebook, is at CIL Teams. And our YouTube is www.youtube.com/@CIL_teams. All right. So once again, thank you very much for joining this webinar. We hope to see you again when next we are hosting our webinar. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.